Welcome back to Still Unbelievable. I'm your host, David Johnson. I'm joined by Andrew Knight, and today we have a very special guest with us. Say hello to Bart Campolo. How you doing, Bart?
Hey, Bart. I'm doing good. Hi, you guys.
Wow. Yeah, this is fantastic. So I will say on air, just as I did off air, I'm a big fan. So I'm really excited to talk to Bart. Bart's a smart guy, and the thing about Bart is he has gone through a very similar journey to me. His father's a famous preacher. My father, not quite as famous as Tony Campolo, to be sure, but we were a big deal in our area, and so I'm used to being in that shadow, and I followed in his footsteps at a very early age. Young preacher, we did a lot of work together, church planning, that sort of thing. And so it's a similar story. The difference is, at least one of the differences, Bart had that moment with his father, and they dealt with it honestly and openly, and I love them for it, for sharing that publicly. It inspired me. My dad and I have not. We haven't. We dealt with this problem of me leaving the church by being in denial. That's how we have existed for the last several years. Just never, ever talking about it because we were both too afraid or too inept to have the discussion. And so part of what we're going to do today is have some of that discussion that people like me are too inept to have and too afraid to have, and we're going to find out how to do it. And just to share a little bit of personal baggage before we get started, I called my father yesterday because I was so inspired by all of the prep that I was doing for this conversation with Bart. I called my dad, and I just said, Dad, it's time. It's time we talk about this. It's time we have this conversation. And me being a minor league writer, and he also being a very good writer, I decided to combine a couple of things and say, look, let's have this conversation for the first time after all these years, and let's do it in print, and let's do it in public. Let's write a book together and talk to each other and see what happens. He agreed. We're doing it. The first 3,000 words have been written. And so I am looking forward to that project being completed, and I am scared to death. I am more scared of this than I was when I thought I had cancer. So with that in mind, this is the David that you are meeting today, Bart.
That's. I mean, it's interesting, David. I don't know what mode to be in because, I do this podcast, called Humanize Me, that's aimed at people that are trying to figure out how to make the most of their life on the other side of faith, and I have all these conversations, and that's all good and well. And so, part of me wants to talk to you in that kind of interested way. But then the way I make a living these days is I counsel people, all over the world, kind of via Skype and FaceTime and sometimes in person, who are going through religious transitions. And in particular, people like you who are trying to navigate your relationships with people that are still in faith after you've transitioned out of faith, or who are trying to figure out, you don't sound like a person who's trying to, who's like struggling to find meaning, or who's wrestling with like post-Christian nihilism, where you're like, what's the point of anything, but there are a lot of people that really struggle on the other side of faith. And that's kind of the main group of people I end up talking to all day. And so there's a big part of me that goes like, and one of the things that we end up doing is like a lot of times like getting ready for the conversation with the dad, and preparing and trying to get all that stuff put together. And so there's part of me that just wants to go into like, okay, tell me more about your dad. Like, okay, like how, let's figure out like what where are you going to start this conversation? But what's weird is the first thing I would say is like, wait, your dad's a preacher. Is your dad still in the church thing?
He is.
And I'm going like, and you're a former preacher.
Yes.
And I'm going like, you are aware that like the conversation is going to be completely different because you're writing with an audience in mind.
Yes.
Like, you know that, right? You know
Yes.
that like that change. Like a preacher is one way when there's an audience or a perceived audience, or he knows his words are going to be listened to by other people, particularly other Christians. When he has to like show his Christian constituency that he's not soft, there's a very different conversation than the one that he can have when you're alone in a car together driving down the highway.
Yes, I think I recognize that intellectually. It might take a little bit to set in emotionally, but the fact of the matter is, my father he's that way when he's off the stage, and so I think we're both afraid to have that conversation in person alone. I think the only way we can have it is if there are witnesses.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I mean, and sometimes I've actually been like the facilitating person where like two people are like, we need a third party to be sitting there to help us talk to each other. It's but yeah. So like, yeah, I hear. So anyway, you're right in my wheelhouse. Like when you say like I my dad and I have not been able to have that conversation, and we're going to try to do that right now. It's like, oh man, I feel you. I feel you a lot.
So how long was it after your exodus from faith that you had that conversation with your dad? And which one of you initiated the conversation?
Well, I mean, the thing you got to understand about my exodus from faith is that like, people say to me like, when did you start to lose your faith? I was like 15 minutes after I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. Like I always struggled with, kind of the core narrative of Christianity. I loved the community and I loved the lifestyle and I loved the ministry stuff so much that like I was willing to like do all kinds of gymnastics to try to keep working things through. But like I was in process all the way. I passed through every stage of heresy on my way to apostasy. So it isn't like this conversation, like 1 minute I was like, hanging with John MacArthur and like talking about predestination, and the next minute I was like, I don't believe any of it. Like I went on a journey, and my dad and I have been in conversation throughout that journey. So it was, there's still a huge moment for him when I say like, I'm no longer a heretical Christian or a progressive Christian or a red letter Christian or a like ultra liberal Christian. I'm done. I'm a post-Christian. I'm done. Like that was really hard for him. And for reasons that you guys can relate to, I'm sure. On some level, no matter how heretical I was, as long as I was still in the tribe, in terms of his work, in terms of like, my dad's theology is not such that I don't think like the first thing he thought when I told him I no longer believe in God was like, oh, you might be going to hell. Like his theology.
That is definitely the first thing that my father thought. In fact,
exactly.
First thing he said.
Right. And that's a huge, like, depending on what kind of Christian your counterpart is, it really changes the nature of the conversation. For my dad though, when I left Christianity, it was hugely embarrassing. Like, here you are, you're this big time Christian evangelist, and your son is a hugely well-known Christian evangelist, and now he's done. Like, it just was hard for him, both personally, in terms of like, just the dynamics of our relationship. He was like, you're this, like, you and I talk shop, like you were my buddy, my partner. We're in this together, and so there was that like feeling abandoned. But then there's also just like the public realities of when your high-profile Christian son becomes a humanist, and so that stuff was hard. But like the conversation, like we've been talking for 50 years, and we have that kind of relationship, and so it never occurred to me not to tell him, because like the thing that I think he values the most is feeling like he has an authentic relationship with me. And so like it just I mean, as much as it broke his heart that I'm not a Christian, if he realized that I wasn't being real with him, I think that would break his heart more.
Okay, so before I bring Andrew in with a question that I want you and him to talk about a little bit, let me just ask a little advice up front. So the church is full of ex-gens. I call them ex-gens, former Christians.
Okay.
The church is full of parents with ex-gens, and the exodus has been large, great in my generation in particular. I've seen the churches that I used to attend shrivel.
Sure.
So my question would be, for those kids who left, do you recommend that they go to their parents and, have an intentional conversation about this, or just let it slide for as long as they can? Or, what is your recommendation about coming out to your parents as an unbeliever?
Well, I don't have a one size fits all recommendation. Like, it has a lot to do with the overall scenario of your relationship and your own life. I mean, like, I know people, you recommend talking to your parents. Some people, I don't even recommend them telling anybody. Like, I know people that are the pastors of big churches, and their marriages and their kids, and they're wrapped up. And they say, like, so do you say, like, come out right away? And I'm like, no, man, you're going to have to do a lot of, we gotta find you a landing pad. We gotta do some prep work. Like, you're not in a position. Sometimes they're not economically in a position, or they know they can anticipate the response might be that they would be cut off from their children, or that So I don't have. I think sometimes people feel like when they meet somebody like me who's so openly transitioned, and who's like, I wrote a book with my dad, about our conversation. Some guy came and did a documentary about our relationship, that you can get on Amazon Prime, that I don't know if you saw that yet. But like, when you're as open as I am, people sort of think like, oh, I bet you think I'm a coward for not having told anybody, or like, I bet you think that I'm a phony. And I'm like, dude, I don't know your situation. Like, it's not the same for everybody. I
am a coward, and I felt like a phony for a lot of years.
And you know what? Like, and that may be true, but it also might be that, like, Chris Rock used to have this great line in his comedy bit where he said, "A man is only as faithful as his options." And I think that, and Upton Sinclair had a great line where he said, it's very difficult to convince a person to change their mind about something when their salary depends upon their not changing it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that sometimes, like, what we don't understand is, like, it's when our situations sometimes cause us to see the world differently, or to be like, create different abilities in us. And so you just have to be really careful to be really gracious with other people, but sometimes you have to be really gracious with yourself and sort of go like, you know what, if I knew a guy named, like, Pepe, who was in the same situation that I'm in, you'd probably go a lot easier on Pepe.
I would, and have.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think it's really important to recognize that. The other thing is that in our relationships with our parents, like, there's that spiritual overlay of who your dad is as a father, or who your dad is as a Christian, and how his spiritual life and your spiritual life are related. But, like, then there's other stuff, like, did your dad hug you a lot? Like, did he give you a sense that you had incredible value, even if you failed at everything? Did he yell at you a lot? Like, did you ever get hit? Like, there's so many things going on. So the idea of, like, should I be honest with my dad? I go, like, there's, like, maybe not. Like, sometimes people have emotionally abusive relationships, and by being honest like that, they would be, like, leaving themselves open to getting hurt all over again, and they're not emotionally equipped to deal with the fallout. And you go, like, okay, then let's talk about some plan Bs here, right?
Yeah, we played cards and dominoes a lot. That's how we dealt with it.
Yeah, and I'm not like and like there is a like there's a question where we go like, okay, let's talk about the cost of coming out, and then let's talk about the cost of inauthenticity, which is different for different people too. Like some people have a much greater ability, like they don't need to be known in every situation, whereas somebody like me, it's practically physically painful for me to be in the room with somebody if I know they think I'm one way and I'm actually another. Like I don't hold secrets very well. Mm-hmm. Like I and so for me, inauthenticity, like you go like, what would have been the cost of that? I go like, dude, the cost of that would have been so high that I never ever even considered paying it. I never considered not coming out.
It eats me alive. It ate me alive for a long time, and I understand the wisdom of just not talking about it if you don't have to. If you're in a relationship where you never have to bring it up, it may make sense to never bring it up. But for me, I want to be where I'm loved and with people that I'm loved, that who love me, and I need to know who really loves me and who doesn't. And if you love me only because of what you think my faith position is,
yeah, then you're not really loving me.
You don't love me, right? And so I've got to know that, and so I haven't known that, and I'm not sure I know it now, and that's part of what's going to happen during the course of this book. We're going to figure it out.
And here's the terrible thing, David, is like because I talk to a lot of people, like, I can't promise you that your dad does love you. Like, I don't know. Like, not everybody's dad loves them. I mean, I think there's this, sometimes people will give you advice like, oh, just tell him, like, you'll see, daddies love their little boys no matter what. There's nothing you can do. And it's not true. No. Like, it's not true at all. And that's, again, why you have to be really careful with what you tell other people, because there are assumptions that people make that aren't true, and so one of the things I would say is like I would be really interested in like you're entering into this conversation with your dad, and a big part of my question is like, so what do you got around you up there in Orange? Like, who are your buddies? Like, who are you spending time with these days? Because are you positioned yourself in a place where you like, is this a good time for you to take a blow if you end up taking a blow? Because like there are, part of when you tell is about the other person and about the situation, and part of it is like, am I in a position? Is this a good time for me to take on an emotional experience, a burden?
Yes. So I am in a good place in my life where I can do this. It's just a matter of absorbing it emotionally for me. But I am independent enough so that I don't have to worry about fallout in that way.
But like what I'm talking about is like, I'm talking about like, have you cultivated any relationships with any older men? At this stage, and like this would be like, I'm dead serious about this. Like, I would sort of like be sort of like, hey, can you get, is there some encounter or some place in your life where you can just have coffee with an older man? Not that you're going to like unload and tell him all your burdens. He's going to be your father figure or whatever, but just, do you have some people in your life? Because like, if your dad ends up hurting you, sometimes it's really helpful to have other people that can kind of pick up some of the slack there and give you a sense of worth and value. And you go like, well, my girlfriend does that, or my wife, and I go like, yeah, it's different when it comes from it's different coming from another man.
Yeah. Well, I can see that, and I don't, for reasons that we might have to talk about offline, I think that my generation suffers from a death of heroes, and father figures. I think that we have suffered greatly. We've lost a lot of the ability to trust that possibly former generations have had. And I admit to being one of those people who used to have mentors that I simply don't have anymore, and I no longer seek that in my life anymore. I don't trust anyone to take that spot.
Yeah, and that's I hear you, and you're right. There are a lot of people that, particularly people that like went through it in the church, because of course the mentor relationships were all wrapped up in weird spiritual, stuff that a lot of times wasn't authentic, at least from my end. And so sometimes those relationships are really fraught. And yet, like, people can tell me, like, I don't trust that, I don't want that, I'm not looking for that, and I go, like, okay, that's fine, like, but you at least want to be aware that it's not there, because and aware that, like, that makes you vulnerable to your dad in a way that you just got to be mindful of. You got to be mindful, like, if your dad's the only older man that, like, you care about, it puts an outsized burden on that relationship, and that's just something to think about.
Yeah, he's kind of the last one. Look, I am literally wiping a tear out of my eye right now. So I'm gonna end this section of the David Johnson counseling session. Look, no, I actually want to carry this on much further, but we've got some other things to talk about. So instead, I'm gonna put Andrew in the hot seat.
As I let this go, like that my work is all about, like, the main thing I'm about is trying to create spiritual communities, like loving, warm, not angry atheist clubs, but like communities that are built around people trying to help each other become more loving and build better relationships and make the world a better place and make the most of this life in a secular way. That's my deal, right?
Right.
And like, this is exactly why that's my deal. Okay? Because, like, I mean, I know I love all these podcasts and books that people are doing, and there's like lots of like there's all these debates going on and all this stuff, like, and everyone's got like all these kind of cool arguments, and in the end, like, a lot of people need a kind of relationship that makes it possible for them to do the kind of work that you're doing right now. And so I just want to let you know, like, one of the main things that, like, I care about is trying to create context where people aren't as emotionally lonesome out there in the big bad world, because there's a lot of shit that we got to dig through, and it's very hard to dig through it if you're out there on your own.
Well, we're gonna. I think we might come back to this.
We'll talk later. Right?
No. We might come back to this on mic. But for the so Andrew asked me very specifically to cover one area which I very much want to cover anyway. Now, I don't have kids. There's a backstory to that too, but we won't go there. Andrew has raised 2 kids previously, and he's got one on the way. And so I thought about him as I was putting this question together, and I thought about you, although I don't know the answer to it, because you come from a very different place religiously than we do. Part of his concern, and mine too, is when you are the prodigal child and you have kids and you want your kids to have a relationship with your grandparents want to have a relationship with the kids, that they want to take their kids to church and indoctrinate them into Christianity, and you don't want any part of that. You don't want your kids to have any part of that. How do you deal with that? I want you to just think about your answer to that, and I want to bring Andrew in and let him talk about some of how he's going through that right now, because this is a very fresh thought process for him, And maybe you and he can have some conversation around there that our audience will find useful. So at this moment, I'm just going to throw it over to Andrew.
So, David, I learned some things about your story there that we've been friends for 37 and 38 years. I learned something about your story there, several things actually that I didn't know. So thanks for sharing the story. And right now, I hadn't planned to do this on air, but there are possibly other listeners who heard your story and it activated sort of a crisis in their own minds. And so I want to offer something for our listeners right now before we go into any further questions. If you are suffering through religion, if you're considering leaving, if you just need someone to talk to and you want that someone to be there without a religious viewpoint, there is a place you can go. There's actually a phone number you can call. So go to recoveringfromreligion.org, recoveringfromreligion.org, and click on the Hotline Project button. That will take you to a page that actually gives you an 800 number that you can call to talk to a crisis counselor. Now, if you are considering taking your own life as a result of a crisis, this is not the number to call. But if you need a secular counselor, if you need to talk about leaving faith, there are numbers you can call. If you're deep in the middle of the night and you're in pain and you don't have a community, recoveringfromreligion.org, click on the Hotline Project button, call the number. And Bart, I know you do this professionally. We haven't asked up to this point, but so that our listeners do not have to go all the way to the end of the show. How do they contact you?
Oh, I'm easy to find. I mean, you could Google my name and you'd probably end up on my website, which is bartcampolo.org. And there's a place on it where it says contact Bart. And you go like, yeah, but that goes to the staff, your mighty staff. Like, there's no staff. That goes right to my email. And so, don't kid yourself. So yeah, I'm easy. And there's a whole thing on there about the counseling and coaching that I do for folks, one-on-one. And it always starts with a free consultation. The first call is like, let's just see. Because, a lot of times people, like, what they really need is not me. They need something different, and I can steer them in a better path. But yeah, I'm always available to people that are going through stuff, and I'm easy to find.
So listeners, if you are having a crisis of faith, if you're deep in the middle of the night and you need someone to talk to, we give you resources here to do that and strongly encourage you to reach out. David told you his story with his dad, so I'll refrain from telling you mine. But religion can be a hardship. Don't let it be one for you. Reach out if you need to. So Bart, you've got kids. I've got a couple in the past. I've got one on the way. And one of the things that I worry about, because I do live in the Southeast, and I do live in a heavily religious community. We've got preachers and ministers and song leaders, and we even, my girlfriend's immediate family, they even have communion on New Year's Eve every year. That's the sort of religious community I live in. And I walked away from faith years ago. We talked a little bit about it in the run-up to the show. And it's going to be a challenge to raise this young lady, not only in the Southeast, but in a heavily religious part of the Southeast, because we're very connected to the conservative evangelical movement even now. And I'm wondering what you would advise. Now, let me say for the listeners, it's not a hostile environment. I, as an atheist, have been invited to speak at a Church of God in this area. So we don't have a combative, hostile relationship. But they pray at every meal, get together, surround the table, hold hands. You know the whole story because I'm sure you've been a part of it. How do you help raise children with a reasonable view on the world, not depending on religion, when so much of what we have, when the Christian community is so close, what do we do as parents?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a
Sorry,
listener...
not to put you on the spot.
No, it's good. I had a listener question a few months ago where we every other podcast, like we'll do a question and answer thing, and somebody called in with where they were talking about the kind of this very issue, and so I ended up doing this kind of whole program about that stuff. And the letter I got afterwards was somebody said, all right, that's all good. My father wants to take our kids to the Ark experience in Kentucky.
Yeah.
You know,
Ken Hams
wants to take them to the Christian.
Say that again, Dave. That's right.
Oh no.
Yeah, Ken Hams' Ark experience
right.
that is probably the worst economic debacle for the state of Kentucky in the history of the state of Kentucky. Yeah.
Or they want to go to the Creation Museum or something. It's like, what do I do? And and it was a really interesting thing. And here's what I would tell you, like as a general rule, and that is, I mean, first of all, it's very different if you and your partner are on the same page, and like you're like, we are raising our kids in this kind of a household, and the narrative in this household is consistent. Like this is how mommy and daddy see things, right? It's very different than when you're in a marriage where one person's still in kind of supernatural faith and the other person isn't. Then that's a much more challenging scenario. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know
we
which
are
one
both we're both atheists.
Okay. So I'm just
now slightly less on. I think she's less of a hardliner than I am, but we are both confirmed skeptics of any monotheistic religion.
So I think one thing, and like swing you back a little bit to talking with David, but like I'll just for a second, and then it's like when I have when I'm kind of coaching somebody up for that conversation, one of the things I always say is like, you want to start not by saying, hey, mom and dad, I'm not a Christian anymore, or I don't believe that stuff, or I think it's all foolishness. You want to start by saying, you know what? Here are all the, I'm so grateful for these things that I learned. Like, because within your Christian journey, you may have learned a lot of things that you're not grateful for. But there are certain kinds of values and practices that, like, they're not Christian. They're just human values. But you learn them in the context of the church. And you want to be able to sort of say, like, these are the things that I value. These are the things these are the kind of the commitments that we share in common. Here are all the things I love about you and your tradition and the tradition that you raised me in, right? Now that's like that and like I could go on and give you like my whole 8-point, 9 chapter conversation about how to talk to your parents about your life. But the reason I start with that one is that when you come back around and you got kids, what you're trying to raise your kids to say is like, listen, here are these values. Here are these things that and I can tell you a story about why I think these are important, why I think forgiveness is important, why I think kindness is important. Why, like I can tell you, like I can give you a story that's completely natural, that's based in kind of evolution and the wonder of human consciousness, right? Your grandparents share most of those values, and they believe in them for they believe in them for a very different reason. They have a different narrative. They have a different story. And, and there are people over in Afghanistan, and many of them share these values, and they believe them for a third reason. Like people believe all kinds of things. Okay?
Sure.
And so, but here's the thing, is that then when you come to your family, I think what you're able to say to them is this: I want my kids to know you for who you are. And so you are absolutely allowed to tell them what you believe and why you believe it. What you're not allowed to tell them is that it's true. You're allowed to tell them why you believe that it's true, but like they're little kids. You're allowed to tell them that fire will burn their hands, and I'll support you in that, right? Like that's like, but you can't tell them, and you're not allowed to tell them that mommy and daddy are wrong and that they're going to burn in hell if they don't change their minds, you're not allowed to like take them away and say like, let's pray for mommy and daddy together because we don't want them to go to hell, do we? You're allowed to say to them, listen, your parents are good people and they believe these values for one reason. We believe we have a different story. Like, this is what grandma and I believe. And they can ask you questions about it because I want my kids to know you for who you really are, and you really are Christians. You're allowed to tell them who you are, but you're not allowed to tell them what the way the world is. Like, that's the parent's job.
So, folks, you heard good advice right here.
Brilliant.
That will shut that question down.
Yep.
There is a commitment implicit, Bart. If I understood you, there's a commitment there, an implicit commitment to the idea of truth, not to the idea that some Christianity is true, whatever version you hold, but to the idea of supporting true things about the world, and of not allowing people to indoctrinate your children.
And I think like and your parents go, well, it is the truth. Like we're how can I not? And you go like, if you can't accept that like different people in the world have different worldviews, then you're dangerous. Like, then I can't have you around my kids.
So thank you. Look, I was touched by David's story. I am equally touched by that answer because my girlfriend and I struggle with this. How are we going to let our daughter know her grandfather, who's a preacher, and her other grandfather, who's an elder in a Southern Baptist church? How are we going to let her be connected to both sides of the family that really care for her already, right? I mean, she'll be born in June. Right. But they're already saying, look, we want to be there. We want to get to know her. My dad was a naturalist who sort of converted to religion later on. I grew up watching Wild Kingdom and Jacques Cousteau, right? But he wants to take her for a walk in the woods like he did me and my brother, right? And I want her to be able to do that with him because those were the best moments in my childhood that weren't filled with a lot of great moments.
And here's the thing, Andrew. And here's the thing. I want them to, too. I want them to go on that walk, okay? Yeah. But, okay, and there's two things. I want to give you a word of confidence, and I want to give you a word of advice. And the word of confidence is that in the early stage of your kid's life, no matter what anyone else says, you are going to be, you and your spouse, or you and your partner are going to be the largest influence on them. You're going to, in a sense, be the world. And so when they go out and they get another influence or they get another story or something like that, like the word of confidence is they're going to hold that up against your reality. Like, it works. It's the same for a Muslim kid, same for a Christian kid. Like, they can go out with little atheist grandma, and like they're still going to come home and go like, you know what? The world is what the world is in my house, because that's my world in the early stages. So the first thing is that you don't have to like largely you're going to define your kid's understanding of reality. The second thing, and this is the word of advice, is when your kid goes out there and they get influenced by anything else, and they come back and they tell you, Grandma says that Noah and the ark and all of this, and there were 2 by 2, and I saw the ark, and they said, like, what you're prone to do, baby, is to go like, baby, that's not true, or Grandma's like that, she believes that, but like religion, those. All you have to do is look the kid in the eye and say, really? So Grandma said that. What do you think about that? Like, what do you think?
So I am a.
Wait. Let me.
Oh, sorry.
Because you say, what do you think? And you know what the kids like? There are 3 possibilities, right? One is the kid's going to say, that makes perfect sense to me. Okay, which is it's unlikely because it's against everything that they've grown up in their household. But it could happen. They can go like, wow. Sure. A Noah's Ark thing makes sense, and you go like, really? Why? You like, do you think and how does that make you feel? What do you, like? And the kid's gonna go like, that sounds horrible. Like God killed everybody, but these like, and you just go like, yeah, That does seem hard, but much more likely that it's going to go like, that doesn't seem real. Or I think that's a story like the story that you read me last night about the dragons, and you go like, yeah, people do. People tell stories, and they make. And why do you think people tell that story? And you go like, as long as you just talk to them about the story and like just find out what they're feeling. Most of the time, all you have to do is validate their own sense that doesn't make any sense. Rather than, you don't want to tell them what to believe. You want to tell them that it's okay to listen and to think and to be honest with themselves about their own feelings. That's how you arm them. You don't arm them by giving them your narrative. You arm them by saying, like, lots of people have lots of different narratives. What's yours?
Sure. Absolutely.
At what point do you tell them that grandma is off her meds? Is that not a part of it?
Right up front. You tell them right up front. So David and I are both big fans of the Socratic method. And what I want for this little girl, like I wanted for my first two children, is to have the tools to evaluate the world in a clear and definable way, to find their path, without needing a magic friend in the sky to make something right. And whether my daughter in the end turns to religion, I want her to turn there for good reasons and not bad ones. And so we'll see how it goes.
And here's the main thing: is like, if your daughter grows up with the clear understanding, and this is what David is struggling with right now. If your daughter grows up with the clear understanding that your love for her in no way depends upon her adopting your narrative.
Right.
If she knows that, like, whatever she ends up thinking, as long as she values the things you value. Like, that's the thing. Like, you go unconditional. No, like, if you like torturing kittens, you're going to be shocked at how much I don't like you. You go like, so your love is unconditional. It's very conditional. And I go like, yeah, go ahead, come and punch my daughter in the mouth and see how conditional my love for you is, brother. Because I'm telling you, all love is conditional, right?
Sure, like, of course it is.
But if she understands that, like, what matters to you are her values. What matters to you is whether she's kind, or whether she's forgiving, whether she's thoughtful. But like she can believe, like lots of people believe. Grandpa and I think very different things, and I love Grandpa and I respect Grandpa, and I don't think Grandpa's stupid. And one of the things that I always tell my kids is, people don't choose what they believe, right? Like
that's right. Look,
people don't choose what they believe, right. and so. So to say to somebody like, I'm going to not love you if you don't believe what I believe is really unfair. But if she grows up knowing that she can't lose your love because of what she believes or doesn't believe or can't believe, that's when she's in a position to like make decisions about what she really believes or what she really thinks, or to explore things in a fearless way. Because she's like, you know what? No matter where I end up, my daddy and my mommy love me.
So can I toss a monkey wrench into this real quick? I love everything that you're saying there. I would like to say that I'm taking notes, but I'm not, because I've got the recording. I just go back and listen to it. But otherwise, I would be taking notes. This is fantastic. But I think my experience with church is so much different than yours that if I had kids, I would have a hard time enacting your advice, as good as it sounds. And the reason is because I was baptized at the age of 7. This was not uncommon when and where I came from.
Right.
But one of the reasons I was baptized at the age of 7 is because I had a very clear awareness of two things. One, my sinfulness and decrepitude in the sight of God, and two, my imminent and bad eternal death in a flaming pit of hell. I knew these things very well. Now, I knew all kinds of church doctrines at age 7. I would like to think that I was a fairly exceptional kid. But those two things I knew very well, and that's just from being in church until I was 7.
Yeah, it's the most awful doctrine in all of time and history is original sin. Like, right. It is a horrible, it is a abusive, toxic, terrible doctrine.
Thank you for saying that. So what I'm suggesting is that it doesn't actually take that long before that doctrine messes you up and gets in your head. And so to send my hypothetical kid...
Stop right there, David. Stop right there, David. That is not true, okay? That doctrine, I was raised around that doctrine my whole life, and it never penetrated me for a very simple reason. It was in complete contradiction to everything my parents told me about myself.
Right, but my parents didn't tell me those things that your parents did.
That's right. And so what I'm telling you is that the doctrine only works if the parents are behind it.
But I think you guys agree there. I think what David's saying is that his parents did push that on him and yours didn't.
Right. So my concern is if I hand my hypothetical grandkids or my hypothetical kids over to my parents for going to church on Sunday, that my kids are going to go to that kind of church, and their Sunday school classes are going to be that kind of Sunday school class, and I'm
not handing them over. I'm not handing them over. I'm not handing them over to Grandma to go to church. What I'm going to say is, like, Grandma wants to take you to church, and you need to go because you need to see, like, that's how Grandma lives. Like, that's very important to Grandma. Like, check it out. What do you think? And if the kid comes home and they go, like, how did you like that? What did you think? And if they go, like, that was great. I loved it. I want to go back. Then you go, like, okay. But every time you come home, we're going to talk about whatever it is that happened there. But, like, I'm not giving my kid over to Grandma and saying you can take my kid to church and indoctrinate them. What I'm saying is that you can share with them your life. You can share it with them as your thing. But, like, and so my kids might visit church with Grandma, like when we go to visit Grandma's house. But you go, like, do I let Grandma take them to church to be indoctrinated? And the answer is, I don't. Not until,
so let me ask you a question.
Not unless they say they want to go. But even if they want to go, what I'm telling you is that when the pastor says to them, you are deserving of hellfire, you are filthy rags, you are a child of wrath, a kid raised in your household, David, is going to go, like, they're going to come home and go, like, they said I deserve to burn in hell. And you're going to go, like, do you feel like you deserve to burn in hell? And they go, like, no. And I go, like, I don't either.
See, that's every sermon every week at my church, at my denomination. It seems to me, though,
Bart, that it seems to me that there's a safer line to travel. And that line is, I'm not going to so I think my daughter's grandparents will not be likely to tell her that she deserves to burn in hell, because frankly, that's a thing that, that we tell others that we don't often say to the people that are really close. We don't often say to the people really close to us, you deserve to burn in hell. It seems to me, though, that it is a safer bet not to expose our children to, so when you send them to church, you don't just send them with their grandparents, you expose them to everybody that's there. And it seems to me, as a skeptic, that it is safer not to expose them to that influence early, to not let them have that particular experience where they question, because their grandparents are important to them, that there's a place where somebody might even say to them, you know what, you deserve to burn in hell. That does not seem to me to be the right thing to do. Now, I know we could have different parenting styles. There's no implicit criticism.
No, and I just go good. I just go good luck with that, because, like, there's also somebody that's going to tell your daughter that, like, she should turn her body out and, like, be a sex object at 12. Like,
there's not any question about whether there will be people. The question is whether we should be the people who promote that. That is right. Am I going to make the conscious decision to send my child to a place where I know that's going to happen? Now, yes,
and it's going to happen in an environment where these are trusted people for them. So we're saying the preacher is a trusted person who gives good advice. Grandma's a trusted person.
Grandmother trusts these people, and so there's an implicit trust on behalf of the child.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, I think that there's I think you're right. Like, no, I don't think you send your kid. I don't think grandma comes by and picks up my kids and takes them to church every Sunday morning. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, like, grandma wants to tell grandma wants to show the kids, have them read some Bible story. They want to know about David and Goliath. And I'm like, okay. It's, like, what do you think of grandma's Bible story? Like,
sure.
But I am saying that, like, the question is, like, on Christmas Eve, if my grandmother says, "Can we go to church?" I go, like, "Yeah, we'll all go to church." I'll go. Sure. But I'm going to talk to my kid about it, because I'll tell you what, if you hide it away and you sort of go like, no, you never, like, we don't expose our kids to that.
That's
stuff.
right.
We don't,
right. You run the other risk, don't you?
You run a huge risk. You run a huge risk of exoticizing it.
So jumping in as a moderator here, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, I do have time for one more question.
Do you have time for two?
I don't know. It depends on what the first one is.
So, all right.
Well carved. That was very well done.
So, this is such a good conversation. If we had the ability, we would send someone to just tie you up right now and would go another 3 hours. But we don't have that ability. We can barely keep our.
But we are inviting
going.
you back officially right now.
So
I appreciate it.
I'm looking at my couple of my last two that I've got stars beside, and I'm just going to try to ask them both, and we'll be real quick. I'll ask the one where I don't have as much to say, so that you can say more. So I know that you've heard this before, Bart. I hear it a lot. You were never a real Christian. Guess if you were, you'd still be a believer. Now, this boils my blood. I cannot respond to this in a rational way, because what they are doing is denying the better part of my life. And whether I was a real believer or not, I was as much a believer as I could be. And I put all of the effort that I had into it. And so I am insulted deeply when a person tells me that I was never a real Christian. How do you deal with this? And by the way, Andrew, feel free to jump in. That's all I have to say. It just pisses me off, and it ends all rational conversation for me.
I've got one line. Another person doesn't get to weigh in on what I was in truth to myself. And no one else should allow another to weigh in on what you believe your deep-held convictions were.
Yeah, but how do you keep that from being a conversation ender?
First of all, Andrew, if you can say that with a straight face,
I just did.
Yeah, then I don't think you really were a Christian. Because if you really were a Christian like I was, and then you know that we weighed in on other people's spiritual lives every minute of every day.
Are you accepting that I can say?
That was the whole basis of evangelism, was judging other people's spiritual lives.
Right, but what you're saying is right now, if I understand you, I could say to you, Bart Campolo, Bart, you aren't a real Christian. And you should hear that. You don't get to self-report. I get to tell you what you were. What I'm saying is, even if a Christian thinks I was never a real Christian, they don't get to determine my internal landscape for me. They're welcome to their own opinions.
Well, I understand what Bart is saying, though, because it really is the job of the Christian to kind of discern whether people are Christians or not. The thing is, the people who are around us, though, they did say we were Christians. They thought we were Christians all along.
All right, so let me back up.
That's why it's a mistake.
Of course, it's a mistake. Like it's like saying,
so we agree.
But like Andrew, it's like saying like were you a Martian? Like there are no Martians, okay? So were you like from their perspective, there really is such a thing as like a big God in the sky who does stuff, and they're in relationship with them.
I understand that, but they don't get to say whether I did or didn't believe in it at some point in the past.
But they're not saying whether you believed in it. They're saying whether your belief in it was authentic enough to actually connect you with that man in the sky.
Yeah, you haven't said anything different than what I intended.
Right. All I'm saying is this. Is first of all, first of all, and this really is first of all, the question you have to ask yourself is, why do you think they're saying that to you?
Well, wait a minute. That's not the first question for me. The first question for me is whether anything they say gets to violate my internal report of myself. Now, I might extend that and be charitable about why they're asking me. But my first question is always, what is my internal landscape? And do they get to weigh in on my feelings about what I was?
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is like when you find that magic ability to control what other people do, you please share it with me. People weigh in on me every day without my permission.
But that's not the question. That's not what's between us.
No, the question is whether I take them seriously.
No.
Well, that's a question for me. So I would like to get an answer to that. Whether you take them seriously and how you get past that.
I mean, I got to. I mean, when somebody comes to me and says like, "You're an asshole," or like, "You aren't a Christian," or like, whatever. I mean, you say like, "Do they get to do that?" Well, evidently they do, because they just did.
Look, it feels like you're deliberately misunderstanding. What I've said is, do they get to do that to your internal landscape? I am not fighting against freedom of speech here, and I think I've been pretty clear there.
Okay,
what I am saying is they do not get to weigh in on what I was internally.
Of
course now, they can ask any question they want to ask. That's what freedom of speech. And by the way, I open sourced a book because I believe in freedom of speech. You won't find a freedom of a person who is more devoted.
Okay, then we're on the same page. Okay, so and you can edit all that out. Okay.
No, I don't want to. This is how we reach agreement, right? Is by struggling with the big ideas and trying to understand each other. I think this is exemplary of the conversation that we have to have with our Christian counterparts, is how do we understand each other? So thank you for being committed to the conversation with me, even when we're pushing back really hard.
Sure. Right? Okay, so here's the thing. So back to David's question. David says, what do you do when somebody does that to you? When somebody, ouch, oh, hold on a second. I'm just letting my wife in the door. What do you do when somebody does that to you? And I said, I say the first thing that I do is like, and this is the step Andrew, I misunderstood because I just skip over this step. Like, I know that I know my own experience. I'm not threatened by what anybody says to me. Like, if somebody calls me an asshole, I don't go like, "Oh, am I an asshole?" My first thought, since I know that's not true, because I was there, right?
Right.
Like I was there, I was there cutting the back of my wrist because I had masturbated, and I was taking seriously the Bible verse that says you should cut off your hand rather than let it cause you to sin. Like, nobody does that if they don't really believe what's going on in this whole thing, right? Like, because I was there. So it's like skipping over that step. Like, since I know that what you're saying isn't valid because you weren't there and I was, okay?
Right.
I have to ask the second question. Then I go to I wonder why they're saying that. I
now we completely agree.
Yeah.
We are in total agreement.
Right.
If I could have figured out the right words to say what you said a minute ago, we'd have gotten there quicker.
Right. So
you've got to trust your own internal report.
Yeah, which again, I know that's what's strange is I'm married to a woman who doesn't all the time, and but it's very easy for me to trust my own internal report. I mean, and again, it was the way I was raised. If I came home with an F in school, my dad's response would be like, "Gosh, I wonder what's wrong with the teachers down there. They don't know how to teach a genius." Like it was never my fault. Like I was always right. Like, you know, so the bottom line is that the first question I ask is like, where is this coming from? And of course, what I know, if I really think about it, what I think is that most of the time, what the person is when they see a person who was a Christian, who's lost their ability to believe in God. It's the scariest thing in the world. It's like a disease, and what they're wondering is could this happen to me? Could this happen to me? And what they desperately want to believe is, no, it can't. It's the same reason why women on rape juries often will not vote to convict.
Right.
They want to believe that the victim did something to make this happen. There's some intrinsic difference between her and I, because like this could never happen to me, right? And that's exactly what happens when they're looking at you, especially when they're looking at somebody like me. I mean, I have the people that are the most upset about my deconversion are people that like thrived under my ministry as a Christian. And they're like, you were the one that helped me stay a Christian. And now you're out. What am I supposed to do? Like it's like
that was your conversation with Sean on Unbelievable.
It's incredibly painful for people, right?
Yeah.
And so I get that. And so they're like, the most desperate thing that they need to hear from you, that they need to tell themselves is that there's some intrinsic difference between him and me. And the intrinsic difference is his relationship with God could fall apart because it wasn't authentic.
And mine is. Yes.
And mine is. Mm-hmm. Okay? And mine is. If an authentic relationship with God can fall apart, then, oh my gosh, all bets are off. Like, I'm in real danger here. Okay?
Look, they have to, it does provoke a crisis.
And so the question is, and the question is, what do I do with that person's crisis? And you know, and I think that the answer would be, if the answer was that it's very important to me that this person deconverts, like I need them not to be a Christian, like it's very important, I would probably approach it differently. But the truth of the matter is that I don't think giving up Christianity is necessarily the best choice for everybody. Like I know people that are so deep in it, they're like older, like it's their whole framework, it's their whole community, and like I can't promise them if they leave Christianity, and maybe they don't have personalities like mine, I can't promise them that they're going to be able to put together a whole new worldview and create a new community for themselves and be all well and good. They may be better off with a bad idea that is bearing good fruit in their life. Like it's like you go like, but they all hate gays, and I go, no, they don't. I know Christians love gays, and you know, and they're all worried about burning in hell. And I go, I know, no, some, not all of them. They believe God's going to save every. Like I don't know that Christianity is toxic for everybody, even though the ideas carry within them the seeds of toxicity. And so what I'm saying is like, if somebody's thriving as a Christian, if they're living their best life, if you will, like I don't necessarily have an interest in undermining them. The people that I minister to are people who Christianity falls apart all by itself. Like the internal contradictions, like they can't hold the narrative, and then they're desperate in trouble. And so like if I see somebody out there, or if I see somebody out there who's like Christianity is killing them, like they're gay and they hate themselves because like I'll try to liberate somebody from a toxic form of Christianity, but they're not all toxic. Okay? And my dad's approach to Christianity has like done all sorts of wonderful things in his life. And you go like, I bet you want your dad to give up Christianity. I go like, I don't know that my dad would do very well without Christianity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't. Fair enough.
I'm gonna take the answer to that question to heart, because my response was it shuts down conversation for me. But after listening to you talk about it, what I really should do is reorient and recognize that when a person asks me that question, it's because they are in crisis.
They're scared.
Yeah.
They're in crisis. And since I'm not worried about it, like a lot of times what I end up saying to people is, you know what? You might be right. Like I got to tell you, it felt hugely authentic to me. And I did this, and I did that, and I did this. And I felt, people sometimes mock me because they say, like, you used to talk about God speaking to me. I was like, I heard a voice. I will tell them about my spiritual service. But you know what? Maybe it was all a delusion. All I can tell you is this. Yeah, it felt really authentic to me, and I was completely committed to it. But you know what? If the truth of the matter is that the mark of an authentic relationship with an authentic faith is that it is completely unshakable. If you're right about that a true faith can't be shaken away, I guess I didn't have one. Because
yeah,
that is a much more useful answer. I appreciate that very much. Look, I know that the signal has happened where your time is over.
My wife walked in the door.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that being said, I am going to respect your time and still try to squeeze in one more little tiny question.
And you can do that. And I just want your listeners to know that, like, under normal circumstances, my wife is like a very forgiving and lovely person who would be thrilled for me to be talking to you guys. Her mom's in the hospital, and that's where we're headed right after this conversation, and so that's why I'm on a time schedule.
You're going to help a lot of people with the answer to this question, and rather than me and Andrew weigh in, and I'm just going to throw it straight to you. Are you at least open-minded to Christianity? This is what a lot of the formers want to know after the yelling has stopped.
My mother.
Do you, do we have a chance with you?
Well, can I come? Can I be one back?
Sure.
Can I be one back? It's funny. I had a woman write me one of those. I get these long emails from Christians all the time, like full of Bible verses and stuff like that. Trying to reconvince me.
As if you have not read these verses.
As if I did not preach those verses. As if I haven't made every argument that they're giving. But I'm, as you might expect, I'm unfailingly kind to these people because a lot of times, there's reasons behind why it's important to them to do what they're doing, and so I wrote back to her and I said, listen, and this, as I said, I really I'm so glad you found a path that has made you concerned about other people the way you're concerned about me, I really appreciate that. And if you want to look at these books or these videos about me, you'll see that I tried really hard to stay a believer. I did every kind of I went through every kind of gymnastics I could to stay a believer because I love being in the community that much. And I said, the problem isn't that I won't believe in God, it's that I can't. And I said, this should line up with your theology. Mm-hmm. This should line up with the scriptures because the Bible teaches that we're saved by grace through faith. And this not of ourselves, lest any man should boast. It is the gift of God. And so I said, as much as I appreciate you writing to me, my lack of faith, I can't solve it. That's something for God. So all I'm going to ask is that you keep praying for me. And you pray that God gives me the faith that I would need to believe in Jesus. Because I don't have it, and I can't manufacture it for myself. And that is a very gentle way of me saying to the woman, leave me the heck alone. Because what I'm saying is listen, faith, I don't think that people choose to what they believe. They can be convinced, but they can't change their own minds. And so what I end up saying, you say could I? Yeah, honestly, if somebody walked, my dad always asked me this question. I said, Dad, just bring somebody and lay hands on them in the name of, bring an amputee in, lay hands on him in the name of Jesus, ask that God would restore his leg and have his leg grow back right in front of my face, and I'll believe again. I mean, it wouldn't take that much. It really wouldn't. The fact of the matter is, all the miracles that all these guys are telling me about, God saves everybody from cancer and brain tumors, nobody from amputations. I'm open. I'm open to evidence. I'm a science guy. You bring me some evidence. If I drop dead and it turns out that the Christians were right, and I end up at the pearly gates, and God says to me, what was your problem? I go why couldn't you provide me more evidence? Why couldn't you give me something to go on? Why did you make it so hard to believe?
And the Lord says, "I got your evidence right here, buddy."
And so that's the thing. Is like, am I open? I'm open to there being frogs on the other side of Venus that are living that are controlling us all through invisible strings. Like, I'm open to any of it, right? I don't see any evidence for any of it. Like, I'm open to the idea that Justin Bieber has deposited $10 million in a Swiss bank account with my name on it, and I'm actually rich. But you go, that could happen, and I can't prove that it didn't happen. Okay, I have no incontrovertible proof that didn't happen. But here's the thing: in the absence of any evidence that that's true, I don't make any decisions in my life on the basis of that money. And in the absence of any evidence that there is a supernatural force that is benevolently orchestrating this world for a purpose, I just live my life as though there isn't one. But technically, the best I am is I'm agnostic. I don't know.
I've answered that question exactly that way, Bart. I have said for years, if you want me to believe, miracles that you have to perform are these. You have to address the central claims of Christianity, that there is a God that can live forever, that he has the capacity to rightly divide the world with a line straight enough that all the good end up on one side and all of the bad end up on the other. You have to prove that it's possible to know everything and not just to claim it. So
but I know, but Andrew, I know you're right. But I want to say one thing, that takes a lot of time and effort. It's much easier to just say, you know what, the faith that I would need is God's business. So since you should ask God to give it to me.
Well, that is actually what I'm asking. If God wants me, here's what he has to do.
So with that said, I know that you've got to run to the hospital. I'm going to I'm going to refrain from weighing in on that, but I hope that you will come back and we can actually go through some of these other things. Like, this has been,
it's lovely talking.
Fantastic.
It's lovely talking to you guys. I got a couple of thoughts for you.
Okay.
Please.
The first thing is, I'm guessing you guys found me through Justin Brierley, right? Because that's like where you guys listen to that podcast and then you float off.
You've been on a couple of times, and we both really liked when you were.
Oh, I'm glad. Have you? You guys are aware that I have a podcast, right?
Yes. Tell us about the podcast. Tell the audience about the podcast.
I'm not, and I know it sounds like I'm pitching, and I sort of am.
No, I want you to. My audience is always looking for a better podcast to listen to. Please give them one.
What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is that the kind of questions you're asking, how to lovingly respond to people, what about raising kids? How do we handle our sexuality? All the kinds of questions that people like us who loved being good people in the church. We may not love the church, but we loved being the kind of people that were pursuing goodness, and we're trying to figure out what does that look like on the other side. Right? That's the conversation that we have on this pod. It's called Humanize Me for a reason. It's I have people come talk to me and I'm trying to find out for them what they know that can help me become more loving and become more gracious and become more full of wonder and gratitude for the privilege of just human consciousness. And so I the kind of questions you're asking me lead me to believe that I don't care about your listeners, but I think you guys might like the podcast. I really think you'd like the podcast.
Oh, I assure you, I'm always looking for a better podcast to listen to than mine too.
Oh, stop. The second thing is, because you guys are buddies from the time you were kids and you went through this transition and now you have a podcast, you got to listen to this last week's episode of This American Life. It's called
War Story. Podcast.
It's called War Stories, and the first episode is about two buddies from middle school who start a podcast together, and it's a very poignant story. Their podcast is called Dopey, and it's about both of them being it's about both of their experiences as drug addicts. Wow. But it bears an uncanny resemblance to your guys' relationship, and I think you'd find it would just be a very powerful thing for you to check out.
Okay. Well, we'll do that, and we'll make sure that we include a link to your web site and podcast in the blog and show notes. And
all right,
That's right.
Listen,
BartCampolo.org, right?
Do you guys have all these listeners who write you emails after these podcasts or who text you or like comment or somehow?
We have comments. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So listen, you let this podcast go out there in the world. I'll be like, at some point, drop me an email and let me know how it lands with your people.
I will.
Will do.
I will. I
right,
can assure you it'll land well.
All right, man. It's great talking to you guys. I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Hey, Bart, best
All
of luck with your mother-in-law. We hope
thanks so
that
much.
goes well.
Thanks so much. All right. Later, guys.